What if two men, born poor, raised to be invisible, held the fate of empires in their hands? One wrote a letter with his dying breath, a final truth that would echo through centuries. The other walked barefoot into a palace, and walked out with a crown. Two worlds. Two forgotten revolutions. One message. Greatness doesn't ask permission. This is the story of the last samurai's secret letter. And the peasant who became a king. The fallen blade and the forgotten boy. The last samurai's final stand, 1:30 to 3 o'clock. In 1877, Japan was changing. Swords were being replaced by guns. Samurai, by bureaucrats. But one man refused to vanish. Saigō Takamori, once a hero of the emperor, now branded a rebel. Leading 20,000 warriors in a last stand against the imperial army. As bullets rained, Saigō was wounded. And in the quiet of night, he wrote a letter, his final letter, sealed not with a name, but with a single phrase. Honor does not kneel. No one knew who he meant it for, until 143 years later. The boy with no name. 65 years earlier. In the heart of Eastern Europe, in a crumbling village ravaged by war and famine. A nameless boy, born to serfs, was beaten for stealing bread. But even then, he asked questions. Why do kings eat feasts, while we bury children? Why must silence be survival? His name was Tomas. And this is where his rise began. Two revolutions begin. One man prepared to die to protect old honor. Another was learning how to live, to rewrite it. In Japan, a sword was falling. In Europe, a voice was rising. What neither knew, was how their fates would collide in the pages of history. And in a truth buried for over a century. The samurai's letter surfaces. In 2020, deep within a Tokyo archive, a historian named Emi Kobayashi opened an envelope marked Unreturned Artifact, 1913. Inside, was Saigō's letter. But it wasn't just a goodbye. It was addressed, to someone named Tomas. In Europe. A peasant king. The letter read. If the sword must fall, let it fall with purpose. If the throne must rise, let it rise in service. But how did Saigō know about Tomas? The rise of Tomas the Just. Tomas began organizing farmers, former soldiers, runaway slaves. Not with weapons, but with words. If kings rule by bloodline, he shouted, then let the bloodline be courage. In 1818, with no army, no wealth, only the love of his people, he was marched to the palace gates. The nobles laughed. Until the people behind him didn't stop. Until the gates opened. Until the king, afraid of uprising, offered him a crown, to calm the storm. Tomas refused. Instead, he said, a throne is not a prize. It is a promise. And with that, he became the first servant of the nation. The people's king. The letter's secret. But how did a Japanese samurai know a European peasant king? In the 1850s, long after Tomas's reign began, a Japanese traveler, Nakamura Kenji, visited Europe. He met Tomas. Was inspired by him. Carried his story home. And decades later, when Saigō faced death, he remembered that tale. That's who the letter was for. A man who proved you could lead without a blade. That honor could kneel, to serve. The peasant king's final law. Tomas's final law. No child shall ever go to sleep hungry beneath my banner. He abolished noble taxes. Built free schools. Invited former enemies into council. When asked what kind of king he was, he smiled and said, one who remembers the hunger. The samurai's message lives on. Though Saigō Takamori died on the battlefield, his letter, the last breath of a warrior, outlived him. It crossed seas, crossed time, crossed worlds. Not to glorify war, But to whisper something else. True power doesn't command, it uplifts. And that a man with no title can carry the soul of a nation. A new letter found. Just months ago, a new letter surfaced. Signed by Tomas. Dated 1831. Addressed to the warrior across the sea. Is it real? Is it a forgery? Or was this friendship deeper than we ever imagined? One letter. Two rebels. Across centuries, across empires, united by a single idea. You don't need a crown to change the world. You just need the courage to stand. If you felt the power of this story, share it. Because someone out there needs to be reminded. It's not where you're born. It's what you rise to become. Subscribe for more stories that history forgot, but the world still needs. And remember. Sometimes, the most powerful revolutions begin with a whisper.